Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin had a lot to say in his Tuesday press conference after the team's lost to the Chargers. But among those lots of things he said, he addressed some very interesting points about coaching, whether it's not making excuses for the team's injuries and trying to find reasons to explain away the loss, or it's talking about who's making the play calls on offense and defense. Mike Tomlin talked about how his role plays a lot into that. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're going to break that down, more about the offense and what's going on there. And then, of course, some look around the division, because I'm joined by Tony Serino of AFC North Talk. It's going to be a fun show. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this show on YouTube, hit the like button, please. Hit the subscribe button to the channel. You get all our great content here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Joining me, as every week, we try to get him on the show. We can't do Tony Tuesdays anymore because you record AFC North Talk on Tuesdays.
Yeah,
which is so sad because I can't do my great yell into the microphone. But I guess there's probably a few thousand people out there that listen to the show. They're like, thank God Christensen yelling into the microphone. But he's back, y'all. It's Tony Serino. What's up, Tony?
what's happening? Yeah, it's not even a Tony Wednesday either. That's the other.
It's sad.
It's
yeah, Tony lose Wednesday, and it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't go together at all. But I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk Steelers with you, Chris.
Absolutely. Let's dive right into some comments that Mike Tomlin made. I want to address some things because he had an interesting response to a couple questions that I asked. One question I asked was about, I addressed that the last two games, the Lions and the Chargers game, both the games they did not win. They had red zone possessions where Najee Harris just seemed like he wasn't going to get the football. And I asked him, is there an emphasis to get him the ball in those situations? Because, he's the guy that you guys picked to revitalize the run game. And Mike Tomlin said, recall back and was like, this is about the situation. He talked about how it was more, he said, people wouldn't be talking about this if we had executed it. If we don't skip a pass to a wide open Ray McClown, no one's asking me about the Lions game. If we execute against the Chargers, no one's asking me about that. And I was like, he's right. I wouldn't be, but we are.
Right.
But I feel Mike, because his point is that these weren't bad play calls. If these basic things were done, they would have been executed. This person just let them down. But then it still comes down to, did you gamble on the right people to make the right to not have the breakdowns?
It reminded me of, and maybe this was Mike Tomlin's first season in the NFL when he had the quote where he said, "I don't walk past 6 rushing titles, I walk past 6 Lombardis."
That was his second year with Willie Parker.
Okay.
And that was when they won the Super Bowl. That was when they won the Super Bowl.
Okay. Yeah. And it reminded me of that kind of quote, right? It's that kind of, hey, listen, if we execute what we're doing, it doesn't matter the run pass ratio or when we're running and how, like, if you execute the play that's called, and I get what he's saying there. It is a little results oriented for my liking. I like the question that you asked, and I agree with kind of the premise there of, hey, if you spent the 22nd overall pick in the NFL draft on a running back and you're near the goal line, like, that's 1 and 1 equals 2 there, like, just get him the ball and let's see what happens. And it has been frustrating in the past couple weeks, especially in those situations, right? On the goal line itself, just the play calls there. It feels like this team is going back to being a little cute at those times. When you talk about the little flip play to Fryman, the end around to Claypool, the fade to Claypool, like all of these things, rather than, like, let's just try running the ball a little bit. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You fixed you redid your entire offensive line. You got a first round running back now. Feels like everything is getting a little too cute around that, though.
And that's what we said this last week after the Lions game. I made a whole show about Matt Canada has to stop being cute.
Yeah.
But then it comes down to this appears to be a thing. They're trying to do it. Now, here's one thing I will give them credit for is that Kendrick Green is getting bullied up the middle, and when your center is getting shoved into the backfield that way, it makes running the ball up, especially up the middle, especially in power situations, it makes that very difficult. It also forces you to be a little bit more creative. So I give them that. They do not have power at the center position, and that's crucial to what the Steelers want to do. But still, you have to think there's got to be a way to get the ball in the hands of Najee Harris or play off him better. The Steelers just haven't done that. And then Mike Tomlin, when asked about the play calling situation, Aditi Kikabwala of NFL Network brought up, she asked him like, hey, how involved? Or no, I think it was Jim Collins, excuse me, of the fan.
Yeah,
He brought up, how involved are you with the play calls? He said, I'm highly involved, and he's like, he's like more. And so Aditi followed up was like, so like, are you making suggestions as to what the plays should be? And he said, I'm making more than suggestions. And everyone's like, whoa. So then now it comes into play. What role does Mike Tomlin have in some of the cuteness? Is this him calling these plays? Is it Matt Canada calling these plays? Is it Mike Tomlin? Because as we knew, I mean, we've had the insight for years. We're still learning what a system with Matt Canada means, right? Because this is his first year as coordinator. But we've seen on the sideline, we've had the access that shows in the past years, Mike Tomlin didn't call the offensive plays. He would say, he's like, we're going for it here. And then the offensive coordinator would say, okay, I got to play for that. I got to play for that. Whereas, is that something Matt Canada can do right now? Because again, this is his first year as an NFL coordinator.
Are you going James Harrison here, Chris? Are we doing that? Do you remember what James Harrison?
I remember
what he said about Keith Butler.
Yeah.
He said, I wish Keith was allowed to call the defense. Oh, you know what, Chris? I forgot my Matt Canada hat today. I appreciate you jumping on board, like Matt Canada hype train. Look, Matt Canada has been a major disappointment this year. I will admit that. But as Chris is rightly pointing out here, it's not Canada's fault. It's not Matt's fault. Blame Tomlin. Blame Tomlin.
Blame Tomlin. Blame Tomlin. It's a lot of stuff.
No, I thought that answer was very, very revealing in some ways. I mean, this is like a multi-year investigation by the Pittsburgh sports media,
right,
trying to figure out, how involved is, because there have been rumors, especially on the defense. The offensive side, I think, is very, very new. What we're finding out of this press conference. Defensive side, there have been rumors about this for years on years on years. We debated this ad nauseum. Right? Is Butler just a name and Tomlin's the real DC or whatnot? The offensive side, I think, is more interesting. And I think it was Aditi who did ask kind of straight up, okay, well, there was that one play where you brought in the fullback and ran Najee right up the middle. Was that your play call? And he wouldn't answer that.
And he should.
Yeah, it's a new thing. Here's a new thing. A new thing I want to start for all you out there. Chris, you're included in this. Anyone who's doing film breakdowns out there, when you do a film breakdown now, I need you to let all of us know who you think called the play. Okay, was it A, Matt Canada? Was it B, Ben Roethlisberger? Or was it C, Mike Tomlin? It's another thing you can work into your film evaluation.
This is ridiculous. We're not done with this conversation. We're keeping it rolling here. But first, I got to tell you guys about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. If you haven't tried a Built Bar by now, you're missing out. They say it's a protein bar, but it does not taste like one. You have to try one of these amazing bars yourself to believe it. Most protein bars are chalky, waxy, or just plain hard to choke down. Built Bar soft, covered in 100% real chocolate, and when you bite into it, you know you're eating something different. It's more of an experience and one that you'll enjoy. In fact, you'd swear you're eating a candy bar. Just Built Bars are low carb, low calorie, low fat, low sugar, and high in protein. All the health benefits on top of just being purely delicious, and there's so many flavors. Another great thing about Built Bar, there are so many mouth-watering flavors, including coconut, raspberry, mint brownie, coconut, almond, salted caramel, double chocolate, and cherry barcia. This month, Built is coming out with new limited-time flavors every 3 to 4 days, so check out their website often. You don't want to miss out on those flavors at Built.com by using promo code LOCKED15, and if you use that code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, all capital letters, all one word, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Tony Serino. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We encourage you to listen to all the great shows that we have free and available on all podcasting platforms. Now, Tony.
Yeah.
I'm not done talking about this Mike Tomlin stuff, because one thing that I thought that was very intriguing also about what he said was he talked about how someone asked him to the point, I think it was Joe Rutter of the Trib, and he asked him like, at what point, are these, you're having all these injuries and you guys keep saying you're not making excuses for yourself, but at what point do they become excuses or do they become explanations? And
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin was like, it's irrelevant. Like, we still got to get the job done. And
Right.
Mike Tomlin put it on himself. He said, I didn't do a good enough job to come up with a plan with the limited guys that we had. I needed to do better there. And that's what Mike Tomlin is. Mike Tomlin doesn't duck responsibility. And that's the thing. If you disagree with his coaching decisions, if you disagree with, his playoff record, if you disagree with the thing, you have to at least give Mike Tomlin, he is straight up about what the Steelers need to do. He won't let you in on the inside. Like when Didi asks who calls that play, he's like, I'm not telling you who makes what call. We're not peeling back the whole wait, this, you think this is Hard Knocks? You're not HBO. Get out of here.
Yeah.
But when he's talking about, who should have got what done, he'll tell you know what, Kendrick Green needs to snap the ball better. You know what, we need to run the ball better. You know what, we needed to cover this. You know what, I needed to come up with a better plan. That's who he is, and he kept that in the press conference.
Yeah, what do you think he was referencing there when he said like, he needed to kind of what did he say, like peeing outside the numbers a little bit? Because I thought, I mean, and maybe what he's saying is they just needed to let the defenders play a little more. It seemed like to me, Chris, like they went with a ton of man in that game, and it felt like they did that because they were so worried about the kind of miscommunications that this defense was synonymous for pre-Minkah, and that led to, I mean, really, not only did it lead to Justin Herbert finding some success, but also, boy, did he have some success with his feet as well. Yeah, in those situations. But I'm just interested to get your take though on like what do you think he meant by that based on what you saw on tape?
I definitely, I thought it was mainly about the communication aspect. It was just by, hey, you know what? We got a lot of guys on this field. I mean, no Joe Haden, no Minkah Fitzpatrick, no TJ Watt. You're in a situation where TJ Watt's one thing. He's just a pure playmaker. He's outside, but Haden and Fitzpatrick are so crucial to communication. You ask any defender. I've asked several. They all tell you Minkah's the guy that keeps us in point. He knows what we're all doing at all times, and he's figuring out how to help each one of us, in a given play. With him not in there, you see the impact. Also, for those people who were like, Minkah's not doing enough, you saw his impact in the game. It's like the Steelers gave up more yards and more points than they have, I think, in like 3 or 4 seasons or something like that.
Just want to point out real quick that Pro Football Focus has Minkah Fitzpatrick as, I believe, the 141st graded safety in the National Football League. One of the worst. I think one of the 10 worst safeties in the National Football League. That according to Pro Football Focus. It's amazing how much worse the defense got, Chris, when they took
the worst safety.
One of the worst safeties in the league, took him off the field. And it's mind-boggling how that works.
It's mind-boggling. But again, Tony, we knew what that was. We know their grades are weird.
Yeah.
And that's why you take them with a grain of salt. Like, it's like, okay, you're saying this, we'll take it. Again, I love PFF's premium stats, like their targeted numbers. Their
charting is fantastic.
Their charting is fantastic. They give you a lot of great information. But when it comes to whoever grades a player on a game, don't know what they do. And that's been consistent. But again, you saw that back there. And so that's when I do think, they limited the zone, because when you're in zone, there's so much more talking involved. When you're in man, it's, I got this guy. It's so much more basic, and it's so much more able to do that. And it puts less in the communication department there. But again, it also puts a strain on you to actually cover in man. It also puts a strain on you to, to trust your defensive front for getting there. And like Mike Tomlin said, it's unacceptable the way that we were able to, we couldn't contain Justin Herbert with a 4-man rush. And that's unacceptable. But, the reality is, you don't have a 4-man rush anymore. You have Alex Highsmith and Cam Hayward, 2 good guys, but then you have a bunch of backups, in between them. And then you got to rotate those guys to keep them fresh. So, I mean, the bottom line is you still don't have that crew that's going to be the crew. Because Mike Tomlin even brought up, he's like, we've shut down running quarterbacks this year. They took out Josh Allen. He was not a threat, and he's more of a running threat than Herbert is.
Yeah.
And in years past, they've done it to Lamar Jackson on a regular basis. So it's not like it's something new. It's not like something they haven't tried before. It's just they were shorthanded. And I know, again, Mike Tomlin not making an excuse for himself, but I think that's a reality. And maybe should they have called maybe some different plays? Sure, maybe, possibly. I think they did at points, but it's one of those things where, we tried different things. They didn't work. Instead of trying to go into the minutia of, well, in this play we blitzed here, but this guy missed the communication, or this guy missed the switch off, or this guy had the wrong leverage, or they just beat us. Instead of going through all that minutia, he's just saying, we didn't get it done. It's on me. That's who Mike Tomlin is, and that's what he does.
Yeah, and it was certainly look, and I don't look. I know Tomlin and every Steeler fan is upset about the performance, and it was at times. I mean, for the Chargers, it was so easy. But
Yeah.
we shouldn't dismiss that this defense did come up with a big turnover late in the football game. I mean, they were as
Wow.
big a part
Wow.
of the comeback at the end of that game as the offense was. I mean, they got the 3-and-out that led to the punt block. They got the interception, and then they got the stop on fourth down. So yes, I mean, it was a very bad performance, but mixed in between all that bad was just a glimmer of good in there, which, in the words of Herm Edwards, we can build on this.
We could, yeah,
we can build on this.
We could build. That is what Herm said. But that's one of my questions I wanted to ask to you, Tony. How much of this is build onable? That's not a word. How much of this can be built upon? There we go.
I came out of this game. I mean, look, there's no such thing as a moral victory in November, right? But for those listeners who followed me all year, you guys know I predicted this team to be 9-8 at the beginning of the year. I've maintained pretty much since about week 3 or 4 that this is. I never really bought in that this was a team that was actually going to compete for a real playoff spot or a division title. But I liked what I saw here because I think that this team can be real frisky down the stretch. I think they're a team right now that no one in the AFC is going to want to play, especially teams that do feel like they have real title aspirations. Boy, the Steelers are a team you do not want to play down the stretch. And for a Steeler team right now who's had so many problems offensively, I liked what I saw. I know that we talked about the red zone struggles, but, offensively, I thought that without being able to run the football, that passing game kind of lit it up a little bit at a time when they really needed to. And I think that, defensively, you're not going to get much worse than that. And you're going to get all the issues, I think, were ones that we could see, right? You can't rush the passer because you don't have TJ.
Right.
You have all kinds of issues in the secondary because you don't have Haden and Minkah. These are all things you can predict are going to happen. I think that you absolutely can build on this, and it makes me believe down the stretch that games, even in a tough stretch where you're going to face the Bengals and the Ravens twice and the Browns and the Chiefs and the Titans, like I don't rule the Steelers out in any of those games because they just played a game without 3 of their best players against the Chargers on the road in the West Coast, where the Steelers never play well. And they nearly pulled off a massive upset. So I like the Steelers' chances in any game down the stretch now.
And what would have been a legendary comeback with I think they were like, it was like something 200 and something and 1 was their 200 and something and 1 was their record of being down 17 points in the fourth quarter. Like they were on the verge of doing that. And again, like you said, their running game wasn't playing well. Najee got hurt late in this game. Yep. There were a lot of factors here. I think there's still a lot of positives to pull out from this team. That's why, again, I don't count this team out. I said this team's going to have its bumps and bruises, but I also said I think this team can compete right with the rest of the AFC North. Why? Because everybody's struggling.
This is the point. Yeah, absolutely. The AFC North just
it's not good. It's competitive. It's going to go down to the wire, but it's not a good division. We're going to break down why it's not a good division right after this. But first, I'm going to tell you guys about BetOnline. It's Thanksgiving. We all know what that means. Football. And nothing goes better with football than turkey and betting. BetOnline has you covered all holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline becomes your number one spot for all the sports betting action this Thanksgiving. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus with promo code LOCKEDON to receive that welcome bonus. That's Locked On, LOCKEDON, all capital letters, all one word. It's also not just football. It's basketball, both pro and college. It's also the NHL, boxing, UFC, and even your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season at BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, and BetOnline, where we're stuffed with deals for Thanksgiving. Wrapping up here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm host Chris Carter here with Tony Serino for a Tony Wednesday. It sounds weird to say. It's still weird. Still not over. But Tony, let's talk about the AFC North because the bottom line is the Steelers. They've missed two. They've had 2 rough weeks. Last week, everyone lost except Cincinnati because they were in a bye, and the Steelers had a chance to beat the winless Lions and didn't, and you could have picked up a whole game on everybody. And then this week, everybody wins and you lose. And even though, sure, the injuries play a factor into it, there's no way to look around. that stinks, and it's a bad week that goes into your register. But here's the bottom line, but with that as well. The Steelers are still in third place in the division because of the win-loss percentage of what 5-4-1 is to 6-5. I still don't understand math when it comes to those percentages and how that works.
Ties,
But
how do they work?
how do ties work in percentages? We don't know. But now they're a half game back of Cincinnati. They're, I believe, 2.5 games or 1.5 games back of the Ravens. They're not that far back from either of these teams. A couple weeks of good play by them and bad play by the other team, and they could even lead the division. But still, this is a division. When you look around, you don't know who any of these teams are, right, Tony?
No, you have no idea. I mean, it's not even. So the Steelers aren't playing good football right now,
They're
but
not.
neither are the rest. Who in this division really is? I mean, maybe you could say the Bengals, and I said this on AFC North Talk the other night, where I said, look, the Bengals are by default right now, I think, playing the best football in the AFC North because they were on the bye 2 weeks ago when the entire division tripped over itself, and then they did look good against the Raiders in Las Vegas. But that's a Raiders team that's really been tripping over itself for the past couple weeks as well. But before that, let's not forget that this team got blown out by the Browns and lost a very embarrassing game to Mike White and the Jets. So yeah, I mean, that Bengals team is capable of anything. And like you said, the Steelers get them this week, so they can easily make back that half game. The Ravens, I mean, I've said for pretty much half the year now, like, I'm just waiting for this Ravens team to put together 4 quarters of football, because they do look like, or at least on paper, you feel like you have Lamar Jackson and some of the playmakers that they still have on that defense. They'll be able to put it together, and they're probably still the best team in this division, but they can't do that. In fact, their brand of football right now is as ugly as the Steelers is. I mean, they just, they're incapable of really putting together 4 quarters of football. And then there's the Browns, who are just the Browns, and they're going to Browns it up. And I mean, that team is basically collapsing from within. I know that they beat the Lions, but it was not convincing whatsoever. And everything you're hearing outside of that organization, whether it's Baker Mayfield's wife, Jarvis Landry,
I mean,
it's just
I didn't hear about the wife thing. I just heard his comments about the fans and saying, like, when asking, like, what about the fans, booing or something like that. He's like, we don't care about the fans. Those are the same fans that are too loud when we need them to be quiet. I'm like, wait, what's happening here? Is he attacking the Cleveland fan base?
Well, you have Jarvis Landry basically, in no uncertain terms, either calling us Stefanski or Mayfield or both. And instead of dodging a question about, hey, what's happening with your involvement in the offense, he basically, openly says, like, I don't know what's going on. You got to ask them, right? I can't answer that question. Then you got the wife saying that the rest of the team needs to, she's never seen anyone more tough than Baker, and the rest of the team needs to toughen up. It just feels like that's a locker room that knows that the answers to the problems that they have are not in that locker room. And so for Baker, you don't say that if you think you're coming back, or if you think you're this team's franchise quarterback for life. I think he knows it's probably him and Cleveland are done here. And yeah, that's a team that is likely, I think, to collapse down the stretch, even though that is a team, we talk about just like, on paper, we've said this year after year, that is a loaded roster. But when you're wearing the Browns uniform, the Browns is the Browns, as a wise man once said.
Mm-hmm. It was as a wise man named Juju Smith-Schuster once said, the Browns is the Browns. But again, you look at this. This is why I keep saying I didn't think the Steelers would be some elite team this year. But I was like, you know what? There's a really good chance that this team could make the playoffs and even win the division. Why? Because I don't believe in the Ravens. I don't believe in the Browns. I don't believe in the Bengals. And when the Bengals were winning, I was even saying, like, let's see how they hold up down the stretch. They bounced back really well this off their bye week. They beat a bad Raiders team that's fallen apart, because as bad as the Browns are looking right now with their scandals, I mean, geez, the Raiders, John Gruden, Henry Ruggs, and Damon Arnett, they've lost both their head coach and their last 2 first-round draft picks. That's just a nightmare situation. Eventually, that stuff catches up with you, and it's certainly catching up with them right now. But we'll see. Do the Bengals keep up that pace? But this is where the Steelers, this is a huge week. You're playing the Bengals in their house. They talk smack about you. Best believe, as much as they're going to say, oh, no, we're not thinking about that, they are absolutely remembering what Tyler Boyd said about them quitting. And if TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Joe Haden and Isaiah Loudermilk are all back, as Mike Tomlin said they would be in practice this week, this is your chance to step up as a defense and instead of as a whole team and say, all right, y'all had y'all fun. but we here to wreck shop.
Yep. Absolutely. No, this is a huge, huge week. And you're right about the bulletin board material. That whole like they quit thing, which, yeah, I mean, it felt bad at the time as a Steeler fan to listen to it, but you just knew on the wraparound game, like
Yeah.
that's going to come back around. It's not going to. So, the Steelers, did they quit at the end of that game? Okay. Maybe. But you don't want to say it out loud. Don't say it out loud because it's going to get used against you later on. And
You don't poke the bear,
right?
And you don't poke the bear of the team that's been the bully of you for the past 30 years. It'd be different if the Ravens said that to the Steelers, or if the Patriots with Tom Brady said that to the Steelers. Those are teams that they've gone back and forth, and the Patriots have had the upper hand. Like, different story. But you've literally been the underheel of the Pittsburgh Steelers for the past 3 decades, and you're coming out after one win to say, they quit. Okay.
And
it's all over again.
Exactly. And it's not just the Bengals. I mean, it's the entire division. You think about who the Steelers are right now, with a defense that has declined year over year, and an offense that was, obviously with Ben Roethlisberger having declined year over year just with his age. For this team, for this team to even be competitive, for them to be a game and a half out of first right now, for them to be as competitive as they are in this division down the stretch here, when you have a Ravens team who had Lamar Jackson, who was getting MVP talk this year, a Browns team who was supposed to be Super Bowl or bust, and a Bengals team that is on the rise with a lot of young talent, right? For this Steelers team who should be on the decline, if they win, this would be, for me as a fan, this would be the sweetest division title the Steelers have had in my lifetime, just because of the kind of the narratives all around it. And it's got to start this Sunday, though. They're not going to win this division if they lose this game to Cincinnati. It's going to put them behind too far, I think, in the records to make up for it down the stretch.
I agree. This is a must-win game if they want to win the division. I don't think it's a must-win game if they want to make the playoffs. I think there's also too much mediocrity across the AFC to make to not make the 7th seed.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that 9 wins for this Steeler team will get them in the playoffs, because they'll be 9-7-1 or whatever the stupid 17 game schedule says. And I still think 9 would gets you in the AFC, because the AFC is just it's just not good. The AFC is just not good.
It's not good at all. But no, I'm right with you on that. I think that this is I think this is an opportunity to do that for the division. But again, I look at the Bengals, I look at the Ravens, I look at the Browns. Heck, I look at the Titans this past week. The Titans, everyone. I mean, it was so funny. Right before the game, I was watching CBS's pregame of they're about to play the Texans, and someone dared say, I don't think they actually really needed Derrick Henry. They have Ryan Tannehill. I'm like, okay, you said the thing, and then here comes the Texans just beating the snot out of you in front of everybody. There's no team this year that says I am terrified of that team right now in the AFC. NFC. You might have said the Rams a few weeks ago, but they've had some embarrassing losses. You might have said the Cardinals, but they've been dealing with injuries. There's a lot of situations here where I think the Steelers could come out on top in these against teams. But again, it comes down to what you said, Tony. A lot of these games are going to be coin flips and come down to the wire. It's going to be about can you play more clutch football? I think in the Steelers' favor, they got Ben Roethlisberger, who lives in clutch football, and a defense is often the best thing to have in those moments.
Yeah, the Steelers play ugly football. Before this week, they were the only team in the league to not allow 30 points, but not score 30 points, which means every game is kind of close and down to the wire, and it's an ugly game. And who does ugly teams favor? Well, it favors the lesser team there, and the Steelers are going to be the underdog in pretty much every game they have left on the season. So in that way, the Steelers put themselves in a winnable matchup in every game down the stretch.
Absolutely. Tony, it's always fun to do this show with you, my man. Thanks so much for thank you so much for doing this show. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Let people know I can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Steeler Country, and you can find me on YouTube. I do a show called AFC North Talk. It is a roundtable show all about the AFC North. So check it out there on YouTube, AFC North Talk. And of course, you can find me here, whether it's Tuesdays or Wednesdays. The AFC North Talk schedule is kind of really flexible right now. So I will always be on Locked On Steelers. Try to be on here at least once a week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tony, for being here. We appreciate you also, the dear listeners and viewers, for being here. Because we always appreciate anyone who checks out our show, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, or YouTube. Remember to like this video on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate y'all so much. If you want to help out the show, please head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review with a positive comment, and you get a special shout out at the end of the show. We've done that a couple times this week already, a couple times last week too. So you guys are getting the message there. help us out with that. Thanks again for checking in on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're still trying to see if we're going to have a Thanksgiving episode. We might not. Might be crossover. Bengals guys, we're going to talk to Jake and James over there. But we will have a Friday episode with Jenna Harner wrapping things up. So stay tuned for then. Until then, y'all, happy Thanksgiving. We hope you guys have a great week.